Okay, the reading for this week is the next part in our series on classical Chinese civilization and philosophy and culture. And today we will be reading another passage from the work by Zhu Xi. This is Nature as Principle. Okay, an essay called The Nature as Principle by Zhu Xi, one of the important seminal founding figures of Neo-Confucianism, or Dao Shui, which I will explain now. Neo-Confucianism, as we've already discussed in several other episodes, Neo-Confucianism is Dao Shui in Chinese, Do Gaku in Japanese, Michi no Dogaku. The study of the Tao, literally, is the Chinese and Japanese word for Neo-Confucianism. This is a general term used to refer to the renaissance of Confucianism during the Shang Dynasty, following a long period in which Buddhism and Taoism had dominated the philosophical world of the Chinese, and also a response to the various philosophical schools of thought that developed as a result of that renaissance. Okay. So remember, we have classical Confucianism that appears on the scene with Confucius and Mencius and the various writers that followed him. And then we have Taoism and Buddhism appear on the scene and in some ways, many ways, challenge Confucian thought. And then we have this kind of aufgehoben, or synthesis, or fusion, or bringing together of the various contradictions between Buddhism, Taoism on the one hand, and Confucianism on the other, and we see that take shape in Neo-Confucianism. Neo-Confucianism has its roots in the late Tang Dynasty, came to maturity in the northern and southern Song periods, which is the period that Zhu Xi lived through, the Song Dynasty, and continued to develop in the Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties. This is the last dynasty of Chinese history is the Qing dynasty. So it lasted through the centuries up until the modern period, Neo-Confucianism. As a whole, Neo-Confucianism, Dao Shui, can best be understood as an intellectual reaction to the challenges of Buddhist and Taoist philosophy, as I mentioned just now, in which avowedly Confucian scholars incorporated Buddhist and Taoist concepts in order to produce a more sophisticated new Confucian metaphysics. As Neo-Confucianism developed, two trends of thought emerged out of the Southern Song philosopher and official Zhu Xi's synthesis of the learning of principle and the learning of the mind and heart. So the learning of the principle and learning of the mind and heart. These were previously regarded as two separate realms, and Zhu Xi synthesized these two. The learning of the principle, the Li Shui, study of the Li, and the learning of the mind and heart, or xing, right? Kokoro is the kanji. And Zhu Xi famously combined the Li with the xing and said that they are the same, as we discussed in a previous episode. Both trends agreed that all the myriad things of the universe are manifestations of a single Li, or principle, and that this principle is the essence of morality. By understanding the principle, the Li, that underlies the universe, in much the same way that Buddhists understood all things in the universe as manifestations of a single Buddha spirit, then men may understand the moral principles that they must put into practice in order to achieve an ordered family, good government, and peace under heaven. The two trends of thought differ, however, on the way in which human beings are to understand that Li, or principle. Okay, so in the following document, Zhu Xi, born 1130, died 1200, so the Song Dynasty, states his opinion on this matter. Shit. It's raining outside and my computer's getting wet. Zhu Xi is most famous for having put together the various Neo-Confucian ideas of his time into a systematic philosophical package. And you'll remember that Zhu Xi is the one who canonized the 4 books that we've already discussed and read sections of earlier. Zhu Xi is most famous for having put together the various Neo-Confucian ideas of his time into one systematic philosophical package. I just read that. His version of Dao Shui, Neo-Confucianism, came to be accepted as orthodoxy by the Ming and Qing imperial governments and the government of Tokugawa, Japan. Okay, so Zhu Xi is an extremely important figure in the context of Japanese history as well. Shushi. Zhu Xi is pronounced Shushi in Japanese, and the dominant sort of political ideology of the Tokugawa era, the Edo period, or Tokugawa period, 1600 to around 1600 to 1868 or so, to 1867, was dominated by Zhu Xi, Neo-Confucian thought, Shushigaku in Japanese. Alright, now on to, and once again, this excerpt is taken from Sources of Chinese Tradition, compiled by Theodore de Berry and Irene Bloom, Volume 1. I'll put the link to that in the description below so you can order the book and follow along as I read this. And the worksheet too, compiled by somebody at Columbia University, is available online. I'll put the link to that in the description as well. Alright, The Nature as Principle by Zhu Xi. Before I read the text, I'm going to read the 2 study questions. If you accept Zhu Xi's analysis of the relation between nature, ziran, and nature, the word nature appears in the English translation several times in the title of this essay as well. I think this is a translation of the Chinese word ziran, Z-I-R-A-N is the romanization, shizeng in Japanese. And I think ziran is the word used here in the original, but we'll have to check on that and make sure. If you accept Zhu Xi's analysis of the relation between ziran, nature, principle, li, and human desire, yoku in Japanese is a reading, then how would a person go about understanding principle, li? Where would one search for it? That's question number 1. We'll discuss that in class. Question number 2. How does Zhu Xi's understanding of principle differ from that of Liu Jiuyuan? We've already read an essay by Liu Jiuyuan, who gives a rather different understanding of this concept of li, and we'll discuss the differences and similarities, if any, later in class. Okay, here's the essay. The Nature as Principle by Zhu Xi. The way, the Tao, is identical with the nature of man and things, and their nature is identical with the way. They are one and the same. So Zhu Xi is all about one and the same, right? Bringing things together, as is Wang Yangming much later in the Ming Dynasty. But Zhu Xi often says that what 2 things that are thought of as a contradiction or an antithesis are actually the same. We see this as a kind of defining feature of Neo-Confucian thought. Here he's saying the way and the nature of man and things are identical. They are one and the same. But we must understand why it is called the nature and why it is called the way. So why it is called the ziran and why it is called the Tao, the way. Next paragraph. After reading some essays by Shang, and this is a reference to Huang Shang, a disciple of Zhu Xi, one of his disciples. After reading some of his disciples, my disciples' essays and others on the nature, the teacher said, in discussing the nature, the ziran, it is important to know first of all what kind of thing it really is. Cheng yi. Alright, and we mentioned human desire above. Whenever you see desire in the context of Buddhist texts, obviously, but also in Neo-Confucian texts, including those of Zhu Xi, keep in mind that human desire usually has negative connotations, and it refers to selfish desires as opposed to the desires or the service of the common good, as symbolized by the principle of heaven. Now, if we regard it as principle, hold on, I lost my place here. All right, the rain is distracting me. Let me start from the beginning of that paragraph once more. After reading some essays by Shang and others on the nature, the teacher said, in discussing the nature, it is important to know, first of all, what kind of thing it really is. Cheng Yi put it best when he said that the nature is the same as principle. Zirang is the same as li. Now, if we regard it as principle, li, then surely it has neither physical form nor shadow. It is nothing but this very principle. In human beings, humaneness, ren, rightness, yi, ritual decorum, li, and wisdom, chi, are his nature. But what physical shape or form have they? All they have are the principles of humaneness, ren, rightness, yi, decorum, li, and wisdom, chi. As they possess these principles, many deeds are carried out, and human beings are able to have the feelings of commiseration, shame, deference, compliance, and of right and wrong. In human beings, the nature is merely humaneness, rightness, decorum, and wisdom. According to Mencius, these four fundamental virtues, are rooted in the mind and heart. Xing, okay, it means both mind and heart. Here it's translated as mind and heart. Xing. These four fundamental virtues are rooted in the mind and heart, according to Mencius. When, for example, he speaks of the mind of commiseration, he attributes feeling to the mind. And this notion of commiseration, I think he's referring specifically to that famous anecdote about the boy who's about to fall into a well, and anybody who happens to be passing by at that moment will necessarily feel sympathy and commiserate and try to help the child, because man is endowed with fundamentally good xing, good nature. Our next paragraph, 42, 9b to 10a. Original nature, this is beng xing, honsho in Japanese, honsho. Original nature is an all-pervading perfection not contrasted with evil. This is true of what heaven has endowed in the self. But when it operates in human beings, there is the differentiation of good and evil. When humans act in accord with it, there is goodness. When humans act out of accord with it, there is evil. All right, so when humans act in accordance with with original nature, there is goodness. When humans act out of accord with it, there is evil. How can it be said that the good is not the original nature, the beng xing? It is in its operation in human beings that the distinction of good and evil arises, but conduct in accord with the original nature is due to the original nature. If, as they say, there is the original goodness and there is another goodness contrasted with evil, there must be two natures, two xing. Now what is received from heaven is the same nature as that in accordance with which goodness ensues, except that as soon as good appears, evil by implication also appears, so that we necessarily speak of good and evil in contrast. But it is not true that there is originally an evil existing out there, waiting for the appearance of good to oppose it. We fall into evil only when our actions are not in accord with the original nature. All right, so we might compare this idea with the idea in Western Orthodox Christianity that says that evil doesn't exist as such, but rather it's a kind of privation of the good, or a lack of the good, or a failure of the good to manifest itself. All right, next paragraph, 42, 14b to 15a. In your letter, you say that you do not know whence comes human desire. So remember, human desires has the kind of Buddhist negative connotations, bon no. You is referring to somebody named He Shu Jing. See the footnote about that. In your letter, you say that you do not know whence comes human desire. This is a very important question. In my opinion, what is called human desire is the exact opposite of the principle of heaven, the Tian Li, or ziran, nature. Principle of heaven, Tian Li, and ziran, nature, are used synonymously here, I think. It is permissible to say that human desire exists because of the principle of heaven, but it is wrong to say that human desire is the same as the principle of heaven. For in its original state, the principle of heaven is free from human desire. It is from the deviation in the operation of the principle of heaven that human desire arises. Cheng Hao says, good and evil in the world are both the principle of heaven. What is called evil, is not originally evil. It becomes evil only because of deviation from the mean, M-E-A-N, the zhong of the zhongyong, the doctrine of the mean. Your quotation, evil must also be interpreted as the nature, expresses the same idea. All right, so the fact that he's addressing human desire in this way shows that he's responding to some of the ideas from Buddhism and Taoism about desire and about how desire clouds the human pursuit of the good and leads us astray and keeps us stuck in the realm of samsara, or rinne in Japanese, the cycle of birth and rebirth. All right, so he's addressing some Buddhist concerns, but he's still situated or grounded in a very Confucian framework. All right, that is all for now. There's a lot to discuss here in this short but dense passage, and we'll go over that more in class. That is all for now. Goodbye.